He is the most charming third-generation heir in Korea. Just one glance from him is enough to make all women fall deeply for him. One day he made a bet with his friends. The first woman to walk through the door would definitely become his fiancée. With that, the three of them waited eagerly by the chilled entrance. But little did they know the first woman to walk in would be a food delivery girl. The air was filled with disappointment. But what happened next completely changed his opinion of her. Two men who had ordered food began humiliating the girl in public. They even refused to pay. The heir couldn't stand it anymore and was about to step in to help. But then he saw something shocking. The girl's swift kick left everyone speechless. The two men not only paid the bill but also begged for mercy in front of everyone. Her boldness changed her life. The girl's name is Hae-won. When she was 10, her mother sadly passed away. Her father, who worked away from home, left her with her stepmother. Despite frequent abuse from her stepmother and stepsister, she remained a girl full of justice. Though she lived like Cinderella, she shared the same dream as her mother to become a teacher who educates others. To save enough for tuition, Hae-won worked multiple jobs. With her persistent efforts, she finally received a university admission letter. When she saved enough money for tuition through her hard work and was ready to step into the university, reality dealt her a harsh blow. On the day she went to pay her respects to her mother, as usual, she was informed by the staff that her guardian had failed to pay 5 years' rent. Her mother's ashes had been moved to a storage facility. Helpless, Hae-won used all her hard-earned savings, but it was only enough to cover half of the rent. Determined to pursue her university dream, Hae-won, with no other options, went to find the heir, Hyun-min. After their meeting at the bar, Hyun-min became captivated by this ordinary girl, and he went to the supermarket where she worked, offering to pay $2 million to rent her time for 3 hours to act as his fiancée. In Hyun-min's eyes, there was nothing money couldn't solve, but Hae-won thought it was impossible for anyone to spend $2 million on 3 hours. To show his power, Hyun-min bought everything in the supermarket and then left his phone number for Hae-won. Helpless, Hae-won contacted Hyun-min. The terms he offered were very tempting, and in the end Hae-won agreed to pretend to be his fiancée. The eldest, Kang Hyun-min, is a notorious playboy surrounded by countless women, but in his grandfather's eyes the second brother, Ji-woon, is cool and handsome, like a proud eagle. The youngest, Seo-woo, is a typical warm-hearted man, adored as a superstar, and beloved by all women. But despite all this, their grandfather has his own opinions of them. Though the three brothers live worry-free lives, they don't get along well and won't even eat at the same table. One day, all three brothers received invitations to their grandfather's 5th wedding. Ji-woon was the first to oppose it, and Seo-woo said his schedule was too tight before leaving. Only the eldest, Hyun-min, accepted the invitation, promising to prepare a grand gift, which was to announce his fiancée in front of his grandfather. As the heir, Hyun-min knew that to strengthen the company, his grandfather would eventually arrange a marriage for him. This time he also planned to embarrass his grandfather in front of everyone, but he never expected that the one who would end up humiliated would be himself. He falsely claimed that his grandfather was gravely ill, and his greatest wish was to meet his future wife. To not disappoint his grandfather, he bought Hae-won's time for 3 hours. Hae-won never imagined that Hyun-min would use such a scheme to embarrass his grandfather, and she demanded in front of everyone that he apologize immediately. However, Hyun-min didn't take it seriously. Unexpectedly, Hae-won knocked him down, forcing him to kneel before his grandfather. Her actions shocked everyone present. Then, Hae-won angrily left the wedding venue. No one expected Hyun-min to publicly introduce his fiancée so suddenly. At that moment, the most heartbroken person was Ji-hae, who had long loved Hyun-min. However, Ji-hae didn't show any anger, and even took the initiative to greet Hae-won. Meanwhile, Ji-woon returned and publicly humiliated Hae-won, saying, "Isn't it all because of money? Why do you need it so badly?" Then Ji-woon threw a pile of cash in front of Hae-won. He acted this way because a few days earlier, he had seen Hae-won kneeling at the columbarium while he was visiting his mother. Ji-woon assumed that Hae-won did everything for money and warned her to stay away from Hyun-min, because he didn't want to see Ji-hae heartbroken. But Hae-won wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. She told Ji-woon not to be so arrogant. In her final words, she said, "As long as you have a single breath left, you will never truly live." To preserve her dignity, Hae-won took off everything Hyun-min had given her and returned it to him, even throwing her high heels at him. This was also the first time Hyun-min had ever met such a stubborn girl. Although he successfully ruined the chairman's wedding, the chairman secretly admired this girl. After learning about Hae-won's situation, the chairman invited her to his office. He wanted Hae-won to move into the residence to help him discipline his 3 grandsons. If Hae-won could do as he asked, the chairman promised to fulfill any of her wishes, not only helping her attend university, but also potentially changing her life. Faced with such a tempting offer, would Hae-won agree? Hae-won was indeed tempted by the offer, but reason told her that she wasn't yet capable of reforming or educating others. Despite it being an opportunity to change her fate, she politely declined the chairman's offer. However, as soon as she left the chairman's office, trouble arose. Because she had posed as the grandson's fiancée, Hae-won quickly became surrounded by reporters. Just as things seemed dire, Hyun-min suddenly appeared and Hae-won was successfully rescued. Hyun-min's small lie had caused a huge stir, leaving Hae-won feeling very confused. Only then did Hyun-min realize the trouble he had caused in Hae-won's life. With just one phone call, he had all the online reports about them taken down. This move left Hae-won completely stunned, realizing that having money really could control everything. But Hyun-min told her that there was still one thing his money couldn't buy. On the other hand, the chairman had not given up. No matter what conditions they offered, Hae-won still refused, which only made the chairman believe even more that Hae-won was a rare and good person. That night, Hae-won hurried home. It turns out that just a moment ago, Hae-won received a call from the columbarium, informing her that her mother's ashes had been taken by her father. But after months of not seeing him, her father didn't give her a warm reception. Instead, her stepmother pretended to be concerned. Before her father returned, her stepmother moved Hae-won's luggage from the balcony back into the room, but her mother's ashes were still under the bed. Hae-won had already paid half of the rent for the columbarium, and if her father could pay the other half, her mother's ashes could be properly placed. However, her father believed there was no need to spend so much money on the dead. But the stepmother said she would figure out a way to pay the remaining amount. She also claimed to have prepared the tuition fees for Hae-won's university education. Her father was already well aware of her stepmother's actions, but he never stood up for his daughter. Instead, he scolded her for being ungrateful and even slapped her across the face. Angrily, he said things that Hae-won couldn't believe she was hearing. Upon learning that she wasn't related to her father by blood, her stepmother and sister no longer had to pretend. They told her she never had to come back to this house again. Holding her mother's ashes, Hae-won recalled her childhood, living happily with her parents. Now she walked the streets in despair, not knowing where to go. At that moment, Hae-won received another call from the old chairman. Feeling helpless, she went to the chairman's estate. At the same time, the three young masters of the heir family also returned home. From this point on, the story of Hae-won and the three heirs began. However, the eldest master, who flirted with women everywhere, tried every possible way to seduce Hae-won. Yet, the plain-looking Hae-won ignored his advances, which only made him more interested in her. Before she moved in, he even told his secretary not to reveal that she was only pretending to be his fiancée, thinking it would keep her safer that way. For the first time, Hae-won experienced the treatment of a princess sleeping in a large room. But despite lying on the soft bed, she couldn't sleep and eventually ended up lying under the table with a blanket, as the small space gave her a sense of security. The next morning, Hae-won woke up to find her room completely surrounded by the three young masters, and she realized she had no privacy as they could see into her room from the outside. Stepping outside, she saw that the legendary residence was like paradise, with countless servants cleaning the outdoor area, and the breakfast was amazing. But strangely, despite the abundance of food, no one else came to eat. Secretary informed Hae-won that the meal was prepared just for her because the three young masters never ate together. This was the thing that troubled the old chairman the most. And so Hae-won's first task was presented to her. The task was to find a way to get the three brothers to sit down and have a meal together. Moreover, every completed task would come with a corresponding reward. If the task failed, Hae-won would have to leave immediately. Hae-won thought, how hard can it be to eat a meal together? The first person she decided to work on was the easiest, the third young master, Seo-woo. But Seo-woo told her that the first person she should deal with was the second young master, Ji-woon. However, Ji-woon's cold demeanor always made Hae-won feel scared. He even warned her that if she was smart, she would leave early. But Hae-won was here to protect what was most precious to her. Ji-woon's words seemed laughable to her. Just as she was about to leave, Ji-woon grabbed her, causing her heart to race. She didn't know that Ji-woon was just trying to stop her from getting hurt by the tools behind her. At that moment, Secretary arrived to help Hae-won with her luggage. When her stepmother saw that the man was the secretary of the richest queuing group, she was stunned. She couldn't believe that Hae-won would be living in Qing residence. The secretary informed her stepmother that Hae-won was a distinguished guest invited by the chairman, which was hard for her stepmother to believe. She hurriedly called her daughter over to greet the secretary, but the secretary didn't even glance at them. After returning, secretary hadn't even finished bringing Hae-won's luggage to her room when he received a phone call and left in a hurry. At that moment, clumsy Hae-won accidentally knocked all of her belongings into the water. She hurriedly jumped in to retrieve her things, which were very precious to her. This scene was witnessed by Hyun-min and Seo-woo, who were passing by. They couldn't understand why she was picking up what they thought was garbage from the water. But Hae-won said those were her most treasured possessions. Seo-woo quickly fetched a net and helped pull her out of the water. As this was happening, Ji-woon, who was passing by, handed her a withered bouquet of white roses. It turns out that Ji-woon recognized the bouquet as the one Hae-won's mother had held. When Hae-won dragged her luggage back, she noticed that Ji-woon's pant leg was wet. Then she looked at the rose in her hand and the similarly wet shoes, and suddenly, she felt a different side of Ji-woon. What kind of secrets were hidden behind Ji-woon's cold character? In her attempt to get the three young masters of the Kyung family to eat together, Hae-won barged into the second young master's private gym. To her surprise, the second young master suddenly emerged from the water, making Hae-won blush instantly. Before she could finish speaking, the second young master kicked her out. But in the next moment she covered her eyes and told Ji-woon that if he wanted his phone back, he'd have to come to dinner. Hae-won then ran to the eldest young master's room. He was still lying in bed, dreaming that Hae-won had agreed to date him. When he opened his sleepy eyes, he saw Hae-won smiling at him, which startled Hyun-min. Hae-won invited him to breakfast, but Hyun-min had never been in the habit of eating breakfast. He assumed she was using this as an excuse because she missed him too much. Even though Hyun-min, known for his good looks, was rejected by Hae-won once again, she moved on to invite the third young master, Seo Woo, who readily agreed to join her for breakfast. When Hyun-min arrived at the dining hall, he started grumbling and even tried to hold Hae-won's hand. Just then, the other two brothers showed up one after the other. Although bringing the three brothers together for a meal was a task given to Hae-won by the chairman for the brothers, this seemed impossible. Ji-woon remarked that they were merely housemates living under the same roof. They felt even more distant than strangers. Hyun-min told Hae-won not to invite him anymore unless they were eating alone. Seo Woo also reminded Hae-won to respect their habits. Now only Ji-woon was left, as his phone was still in Hae-won's possession. Although her plan ultimately failed, Hae-won didn't give up and decided to move on to the next plan. She did her homework in advance and prepared the three brothers' favorite foods. Soon, the irresistible aroma attracted them. Although they were all salivating over their favorite dishes, they still turned around and went back to their rooms, thinking about having to eat together. Hae-won had thought getting them to eat together would be an easy task, but who would have thought they would be this difficult? The chef then told her that all three young masters had been hurt by those closest to them, so what seemed like a simple task was actually very challenging for them. Both plans had failed, and this left Hae-won feeling quite frustrated. The chef mentioned that while they appeared wealthy, in reality, they were all pitiable children. The eldest young master lost his father when he was 9, and his mother never took care of him, which is why Hyun-min was used to eating alone. The second young master had been sent back by his grandfather less than a year ago, and without parents, he hadn't adjusted to this family at all. The third young master, relying on his looks for fame, had to watch what he ate. Hae-won realized that their fates were as unfortunate as her own. But to complete the task given by the chairman, what new strategy would Hae-won come up with? Every time Hyun-min broke up with a girlfriend, he would give her a luxury car as compensation. His family's mansions were too many to count, yet he had his eyes on a Hae-won who paid no attention to him. One day, Hyun-min took Hae-won to a luxury store for shopping. Hae-won tried on several outfits, but in the end she only chose 3. She didn't understand the spending habits of wealthy people, nor did she need so many clothes. However, for Hyun-min, these items were only a third of his daily spending. He then took Hae-won to a restaurant, where they unexpectedly ran into Ji-hae and the second young master. Hyun-min turned to leave, but Hae-won didn't want to create an awkward situation, so the four of them ended up sitting together. Ji-hye immediately recognized that Hae-won's clothes had been chosen by Hyun-min, as that brand was not something just anyone could afford. It dawned on Hae-won that Hyun-min had spent so much on her over the past few days. Hyun-min explained that Ji-hae was just envious of him, and also mentioned that Hae-won was living in the Kyung residence under the title of his fiancé. Seeing Hyun-min's attentive care for Hae-won made Ji-hae feel heartbroken. At the same time, Ji-woon, sitting nearby, felt uneasy as well. One brother was always trying to hurt Ji-hae, while the other was constantly trying to please and comfort her. Upon learning that Hyun-min didn't like Ji-hae, Ji-woon quickly ran out to chase after her. Ji-hae was wandering the streets in a daze, nearly getting hit by a truck coming from the opposite direction. Fortunately, Ji-woon saved her just in time, preventing a disaster. Ji-woon couldn't bear to see the woman he loved suffer and was determined to take on all the pain himself. Meanwhile, Ji-hae's only wish was for Hae-won to leave the man she loved. This led Ji-woon to come up with a bold idea. Just as Hae-won was preparing dinner, someone hugged her from behind. Hae-won never expected that the person who hugged her would be Ji-woon. This moment was coincidentally seen by Hyun-min. Just then, Seo Woo and the secretary suddenly appeared, preparing a birthday surprise for Hae-won. Hyun-min took the opportunity to say that this little prank was a gift for her. Although they were all teasing Hae-won, the brothers knew what was really going on. They awkwardly sat together, and Hae-won took the chance to snap a group photo. In fact, it wasn't Hae-won's birthday at all. She had used this little trick to deceive Seo Woo so that everyone could sit together. Later, she presented the photo to the old president, marking the first family portrait of the grandsons. To thank Hae-won, the old president not only prepared her college tuition but also covered the rent owed for her mother's ashes, allowing her to finally put her mother to rest. With that taken care of, Hae-won felt relieved. However, what task would the old president assign her next? Next day, when Hae-won returned, she noticed that the chef seemed to be preparing a banquet. After asking, she learned that the president's 3 sons' memorial service was approaching. Curious about the family situation, Ha-won approached the old president, expressing her willingness to help persuade the three brothers to attend their father's funeral. The old president agreed to her offer. Although Ha-won was known for her strength, this task felt useless. That day, Ha-won happened to visit Seo Woo's room and discovered a new song he had written for their father, along with a photo of Seo Woo and his dad. Upon seeing Ha-won touch his belongings, Seo Woo's expression immediately changed. Ha-won seized the opportunity to encourage Seo Woo, suggesting that if he missed his father he should let him know. After she left, Seo Woo stood there in a daze, unable to hold back his tears. When she stepped outside, she ran into Hyun Min's mother. Hearing that Ha-won was her son's fiancé, she insulted Ha-won harshly. At that moment, Hyun Min rushed over and pulled Ha-won away, angrily telling her to mind her own business and that he never considered her a friend. His words hurt Ha-won deeply. That night, Ji-woon heard Ha-won humming sadly and asked why she wasn't resting at such a late hour. Ha-won explained that she might have eaten something wrong and felt uncomfortable in her stomach. Initially, Ji-woon didn't want to get involved, but after hesitating, he called her out. He then mimicked his mother's way of helping her with her finger, a small gesture that deeply touched Ha-won and reminded her of her own mother. Since she was not her father's biological daughter, she had been cast out by her stepmother. Even so, Ha-won still wanted to see her biological father. Ji-woon, at a loss for how to comfort her, reflected on his own situation. He didn't even know what his father looked like. They ended up eating instant noodles together at a convenience store, which helped ease the tension between them. On the other hand, Hyun Min regretted his earlier outburst at Ha-won. However, she had been ignoring his calls. It wasn't until he saw her returning with Ji-woon, laughing and having fun, that he felt an uncomfortable in his heart. He reminded Ha-won that love was prohibited at Chewing residence, making her realize her place in the situation, and that boundaries needed to be drawn. The day of the memorial service soon arrived, but the three brothers were still nowhere to be seen. Ha-won felt very sorry as she approached the old president. Moments earlier, unashamed stepmother and the girl pretended to be part of the family. However, the mother and daughter were caught in the act and expelled by the secretary. In her desperation, the girl spread lies on the school forum, attacking Ha-won. By this time, Ha-won had already moved out of Chewing residence and found herself homeless, pleading with her good friend to take her in. She explained that her home was so crowded they couldn't even fit an ant in. At that moment, Ji-hai pushed the door open, and both of them froze when they saw each other. The girl noticed that they seemed to recognize each other, and without waiting for Ha-won's consent, pushed her toward Ji-hai. To her surprise, Ji-hai readily agreed to take Ha-won in. Ha-won knew that Ji-hai had always liked Hyun Min, so she explained that she was not Hyun Min's fiancée and that she had lived in Chewing residence to work for the old chairman. However, that was all over now. Ha-won told Ji-hai not to take it too seriously, and that she and Hyun Min were not suited for each other. Just like that, the two of them went from rivals to friends. Ha-won also asked Ji-hai to attend her graduation ceremony the next day since she had no other relatives. The next day, Ha-won arrived at school and found that everyone was pointing at her. Even her former close friends started to encourage her. Seeing everyone ignoring her, stepsister showed an evil smile. At that moment, Seo Woo, who was preparing for a performance, saw the online attacks against Ha-won and quickly canceled his performance to rush to the school to help. Meanwhile, Hyun Min was still unaware and was preparing a new school uniform for Ha-won. At that time, Ji-woon also arrived at the school gate, pondering whether it was appropriate to go over. Just as he was about to leave, suddenly two female classmates were heard saying they wanted to see how everyone dealt with Ha-won. Ji-woon sensed that the situation was not good and hurried over. Meanwhile, Hyun Min arrived at the school gate. As soon as Hyun Min got out of the car, he was surrendered by many female classmates. This was something he had anticipated, so he was well prepared. Just as he was using a megaphone to call out Ha-won's name, a classmate informed her that Ha-won had already been taken away. Hearing this, Hyun Min rushed over to search for her. On the other side, Seo Woo felt the sudden presence of a big star, but all the girls in the school were going crazy. Then, a girl took him along to find Ha-won. Ha-won, who caught the attention of the second young master, was shunned by all her classmates and was even dragged into a small dark room to be bullied. Upon hearing the news, the second young master Ji-woon hurried over and dealt with them. When he pushed open the door, the girl was shocked and frozen in place, while a few bullies hurriedly fled. Ha-won felt very grateful that Ji-woon came to rescue her, but she also didn't want him to see such a humiliating scene. She tightly clutched her damaged clothes. Ji-woon noticed Ha-won's thoughts and took off his jacket, draping it over her. Just as the two were about to leave, several bullies chased after them. Ji-woon was about to reach out, but a voice called him from behind. It was the eldest young master, who hurried over. However, for him, if money could solve the problem, there was no need for words. Soon, a luxury car was sent out and every bully's run out to find the key. Hyun Min removed Ji-woon's clothes and put the new school uniform he brought for her onto Ha-won. Ji-woon could only turn and leave. Before Ha-won could even say thank you, she was taken away by Hyun Min. Then, Hyun Min brought her to the broadcasting room to change into the school uniform prepared for her. Unexpectedly, he accidentally pressed the live broadcast button, attracting the attention of all the students in the school. Hyun Min actually took this opportunity to confess his feelings to Ha-won. This explosive news instantly caused a stir throughout the school. This scene happened to be witnessed by Ji-woon and Ji-hye, who had rushed over, but no one expected that the heir of the Ching group would be rejected by a girl who looked quite ordinary. At this critical moment, Ji-woon turned off the switch. Just as Ji-woon was about to turn and leave, he heard the secret that the two had never made public. At this moment, the saddest person was Ji-hye, who loved Hyun Min deeply. On the way out, Hyun Min didn't understand why everyone was pointing and whispering about him until he saw the video Ji-hye sent, which made everything clear. Meanwhile, at home, the family discovered the note left behind by Hae-won before leaving, and they realized she had already left Kyung residence. Previously, Hae-won thought she hadn't completed her mission of persuading them for their father's memorial, as everyone had only noticed the arrival of Hyun Min and Seo Woo. They didn't realize that Ha-won had secretly come to see her father before they arrived and had left her mother's favorite white roses at her father's memorial. Therefore, Hae-won's mission did not fail. Everyone searched all the places where Hae-won might have gone, but only the suspicious ones could guess where the homeless Hae-won would be. The girl just got home and took off her clothes, unaware that the young master had barged in at that moment. Just as she was about to enjoy herself, she suddenly heard a Ji-woon's voice outside. She quickly hugged her shoulders tightly and pushed herself into the corner of the bathroom. Unexpectedly, Ji-woon saw 2 feet and pushed open the bathroom door. At that moment, Ji-woon realized he had witnessed such an eye-catching scene. Feeling embarrassed, Ji-woon walked out of the room, never expecting such an embarrassing incident to occur. When Ha-won finally came out of the room, she felt even more at a loss and didn't know how to explain herself. Both of them were blushing from the awkward situation. Just yesterday, Hae-won was entrusted by the old president to accompany the 3 young masters to the Kyung villa for a vacation. It had been a long time since they had relaxed and enjoyed themselves, and Hae-won had made detailed plans for the trip, one of which included horseback riding. However, she didn't plan to participate in that activity. Noticing her concerns, Ji-woon decided to accompany her for practice. Over time, their relationship became much more. However, Hae-won suddenly realized that she had lost the necklace her mother left her before her death. Seeing this as an opportunity to blackmail her, the other person suggested that they would help her find the necklace if she promised to meet one of their demands. Sure enough, Ji-woon quickly helped her find the necklace. When Ji-woon brought the necklace in front of Hae-won, before Ji-woon could state their conditions, Hae-won excitedly jumped into his arms. Once they realized what had happened, they hurriedly stood up, both flustered and unsure of what to say. That evening, everyone happily held a barbecue party to fulfill Hae-won's wish of traveling with friends for the first time. Everyone started playing games and soon everyone was in high spirits. When Ji-hye approached Hyun Min, who had played with Hyun Min since childhood, she was surprised to find Hyun Min there as well. The two reminisced about their childhood memories and drew smiley faces on Hyun Min's hand, hoping she could be as happy as she was back then. Under the influence of alcohol, Ji-hye suddenly couldn't help but kiss Hyun Min. Hyun Min, taken aback but knew deep down that he couldn't accept Ji-hye. Ji-hye, feeling heartbroken, asked if it meant she could accept other men now. Unexpectedly, Hyun Min pretended to be indifferent and brushed it off. Meanwhile, Ji-woon and Hae-won were still playfully messing around. Ji-woon suddenly cupped Hae-won's face and kissed her 3 times. Hae-won didn't resist, and in that drunken moment, they conveyed their true feelings for each other. However, when the girl woke up in the morning, she thought it had all been just a beautiful dream. When Ha-won opened the door and saw Ji-woon lying on the ground, she realized that everything that had happened last night was real. While Ji-woon was still not awake, she quickly ran outside. In her rush, Ha-won accidentally stepped on a bar of soap on the floor, causing everyone to jump in surprise at her scream. By the time the others arrived, Hae-won had already fainted on the ground. After a doctor's examination, it turned out to be a small issue. The first thing Hae-won asked when she woke up what day it was. Upon learning that she had only slept for 2 hours, she was very surprised. Generally, if someone faints, shouldn't they wake up after a week? Why had she only slept for 2 hours? She thought that if she could experience a brief memory loss, it would be perfect, as she would forget everything that had happened last night. However, due to a sprained ankle, the doctor had already put a cast on her foot, while the people at home were anxiously waiting for news about Hae-won. When Hae-won returned, Ji-woon pretended to act as if nothing happened. Seeing him almost trip, Ji-woon supported Hae-won, which made the atmosphere between them awkward again. As Hae-won found it difficult to walk, Hyun Min offered to be his crutch. Surprised by everyone's sudden change, Hae-won didn't know how to respond. In a moment of desperation, she hopped back on one leg. The next morning when Hae-won woke up, Seo Woo had prepared breakfast for her. Hyun Min, worried that her clothes would be inconvenient, not only bought a skirt but also kindly altered the pants for her. Although both of their gestures touched Hae-won's heart, she couldn't stop thinking about what happened last night. To avoid awkwardness, Ji-woon said he remembered nothing from drinking too much. Hae-won explained that she also had memory gaps. That night, Ha-won sneaked out to watch and complained about how she could forget what happened. To her surprise, Ji-woon was also restless. Fearing discovery, Hae-won hurriedly climbed into Seo-woo's room. Seo-woo kindly helped her clean her dirty hands. This scene happened to be seen by Ji-woon. After a long time, Ji-woon intended to bring his favorite milk to Ha-won. Unfortunately, Hyun-min had already prepared snacks for her at that moment, leaving him disappointed as he returned to his room. The next day, Ji-hai came to visit Ha-won. While Hae-won was washing his hair, she secretly went to Hyun-min's room and saw that Hyun-min's room had photos of them from childhood on display. At this moment, Hyun-min just returned. Ji-hai wanted to know what she meant to him, but Hyun-min's cold attitude hurt her feelings again. Meanwhile, Ji-woon heard Hae-won shouting and rushed over to check. Unexpectedly, while washing her hair, Hae-won accidentally fell into a basin. Seeing her adorable appearance, Ji-woon couldn't help but chuckle. So for the first time, Ji-woon helped a girl wash her hair. When he returned, he coincidentally saw Ji-hai crying and knew that Hyun-min must have hurt her. Angrily, Ji-woon grabbed Hyun-min by the collar, wanting to teach him a lesson. Hyun-min retorted, questioning what right he had to intervene. In front of Hyun-min, Ji-hai confessed to Ji-woon, hoping he would accept her. Ji-hai's words shocked both Ji-woon and Hyun-min, as well as Hae-won, who was standing not far away. She wondered what it felt like to see a man in love being confessed to by someone else. Although Ji-woon didn't give a clear answer, Ji-hai knew she had always liked Ji-hai, and she believed Ji-woon must have been very happy to be confessed to by her. Hae-won sincerely hoped they would be happy together in the future, but neither of them realized that they had already developed true feelings for each other. At that moment, Ji-woon felt very conflicted. He had liked Ji-hai for many years, yet he didn't feel as excited as he had imagined when faced with her confession. Instead, he cared more about Hae-won's feelings. Hae-won envied Ji-hai's courage to openly express her feelings. After much thought, she decided to take a chance. He learned some strategies online. When Ji-woon walked past her, Ha-won directly hit him on the head with a book and intentionally bumped into him while he was drinking juice. Ji-woon was almost driven crazy with anger, and to make matters worse, Ha-won ruined his things. When Ji-woon came to confront her, Ha-won quickly hid back under the bed. To his surprise, Hae-won not only refused to admit it, Hae-won, on the other hand, pretended to be pitiful and complained about how she was feeling unwell, asking why no one cared about her. She pointed out that Seo-woo even knew to buy her some delicious food. Faced with Ji-woon's indifference, Ha-won concluded that he couldn't possibly like her. However, that evening when Ji-woon returned, he brought back some treats for Hae-won. Holding the desserts in his hands, Hae-won's heart was already soaring with joy. The next day, she found another excuse to act pitiful and asked Ji-woon to accompany her for a follow-up examination at the hospital. Although Ji-woon was reluctant, he still followed her to the hospital. After the examination, Hae-won was fully recovered, but she felt a bit disappointed inside because now that her leg was better, she had no excuse to continue pestering Ji-woon. To cheer Ha-won, Ji-woon took her out for a walk, and this small gesture touched Hae-won's heart once again. Just when she was gathering the courage to confess her feelings, Ji-woon suddenly received a call from Ji-hai. It turned out that Ji-hai's family had gone bankrupt and had nowhere to go. Normally, the first person she would think of in such a situation would be Hyun-min, but he had been ignoring her calls. Left with no other option, Ji-hai could only turn to Ji-woon. On the way back, Ji-woon felt guilty and had to drop Hae-won off at the roadside. Soon, Hyun-min learned about Ji-hai's family's bankruptcy. Regretting not answering her calls, he dashed out in a panic. He unexpectedly ran into Ha-won, who had just returned, and was even more surprised to see that Ji-woon had brought Ji-hai back. Years ago, Hyun-min witnessed his good friend being hit by a car. However, due to the lack of timely rescue, the poor boy tragically died in front of Hyun-min, leaving a shadow in his heart. He always blamed his brother's death on himself, and although he couldn't face the boy's twin sister, which is Ji-hai, the three of them had once been the best of friends. Back then, he had vowed to marry Ji-hai when they grew up and even carved their names into the tree, but this accident made it impossible for him to face Ji-hai. He ended up going abroad to escape for over a decade, only to find upon his return that Ji-hai was still waiting for him. However, Hyun-min's indifference left Ji-hai feeling very lost, and he even frequently changed girlfriends to intentionally hurt her feelings. No matter how hard Ji-hai tried to save their relationship, the outcome was always the same. It wasn't until Ji-hai decided to give up on Hyun-min and confessed her feelings to his friend that Hyun-min realized he couldn't forget Ji-hai at all. During all of Ji-hai's saddest moments, it was Ji-woon who stood by her side. Even when her family went bankrupt and she was at her most desperate, Ji-woon was the first to come to her aid. Hyun-min wanted to go to her, but he was always a step too late. Ji-hai was desperately looking for help for her father's sake, but no one was willing to assist her. Hyun-min witnessed all of this, so he used his connections to not only find out about her father's situation but also obtained a letter that her father had entrusted to her. Hyun-min thought that by helping, their relationship might improve, but his assistance made Ji-hye uncomfortable. He realized that he had truly hurt her feelings. Later, he handed over a house key to Ji-woon, asking him to give Ji-hye and not to tell Ji-hye about it. It turned out that Hyun-min had already organized all of Ji-hye's most cherished belongings, wanting to avoid burdening her further. He had to ask Ji-woon for help, but unexpectedly, this kind gesture only made Ji-hye like Ji-woon even more. After returning, the two went to a convenience store to eat instant noodles. Ji-hye was curious why Ji-woon would eat such food, but unexpectedly, Ji-woon casually mentioned it was because Hae-won liked it. Ji-hye instantly felt that their relationship had improved significantly, and Ji-woon seemed to have a strong affection for both her and Hae-won. However, Ji-woon chose to avoid Ji-hye's comments. Upon returning, Ji-woon told Hyun-min that he had retrieved Ji-hye's belongings, but this would be the last time he helped him. Hyun-min understood that he had only hurt Ji-hye over the years, so he hoped Ji-hye would take good care of her. Unexpectedly, Ji-woon said that he only regarded Ji-hye as a friend to care for and hoped Hyun-min would not let Ji-hye shed any more tears. However, Ji-hye's sixth sense had already told her that the person Ji-woon liked was likely the servant, so she deliberately informed Hae-won that she had confessed to Ji-woon and was preparing to officially date him. To avoid misunderstanding from Ji-hye, Ji-woon refused to accept these feelings. Yet Ji-hye couldn't understand why Ji-woon would help her retrieve these belongings if he didn't like her, ultimately putting himself in such an awkward position. Every time she was hurt by Hyun-min, Ji-woon was quietly by her side, which left Ji-hye feeling very confused. Nevertheless, her confession to Ji-hye this time was genuine. Ji-woon's words struck directly at Ji-hye's pain, and this scene was witnessed by Hyun-min. That statement kept replaying in Ji-hye's mind. At that moment, Hyun-min's friend happened to encounter them, and knowing Hyun-min had always been lukewarm towards Ji-hye, suggested that they follow her. Another friend, witnessing the scene, hurriedly called Hyun-min. After much hesitation, Hyun-min decided to ask Ji-woon for help, but Ji-woon said he wouldn't involve himself in Ji-hye's matters anymore and returned the key to Hyun-min. Finally, Hyun-min mustered the courage to go to the cafe where Ji-hye and his friend were supposed to meet. Then, he pulled Ji-hye over and confronted her directly about the scandal of her two-timing. His friend, seeing this, could only awkwardly leave. Afterwards, Hyun-min pulled Ji-hye into the car, but Ji-hye angrily told him to stop meddling in her affairs and demanded that he pull over immediately. Once parked, Hyun-min bought a bottle of alcohol and drank it, telling Ji-hye that he couldn't drive under the influence. He then sat in the passenger seat, and unexpectedly, this was Ji-hye's first time driving after getting her license. Although Hyun-min was scared out of his wits, he continued to reassure Ji-hye. Despite the tension, their relationship eased significantly. Meanwhile, a man suddenly approached Hae-won, claiming to be her father who had disappeared for 10 years. Although Hae-won had heard from her father that she wasn't his biological daughter, facing this sudden appearance of his father was something she couldn't accept. She cried as she went to her mother's memorial, wanting her to confirm whether this was true. Just when Hae-won was feeling sad and helpless, Ji-woon showed up. Seeing her trying to be strong while feeling sad, Ji-woon couldn't help but pull her into a hug. The sudden appearance of two fathers made Hae-won feel ridiculous. Ji-woon understood Hae-won's feelings very well because he had only learned a year ago that he was the grandson of the former president. Moreover, his mother had never mentioned his father while she was alive, so Ji-woon knew that Hae-won was feeling the same way he had felt at that time. With Ji-woon's comfort, Hae-won felt much better. The next day, he received a call from the man, claiming he had something to tell her. They arranged to meet at a cafe. This suddenly reminded Hae-won of how the man helped her drive away the bad kids who bullied her when she was younger. Seeing his torn clothes made Hae-won feel more sad. She then found an excuse to go out and buy him a new one. When she returned, she unexpectedly saw the man searching through her wallet. It turned out that the man's real purpose was to ask Hae-won for money. However, Hae-won was just working at Chung residence and didn't have any money. The man then remarked that the second young master of Chung Group seemed to care a lot about her and that he owed him some money. Upon learning that Ji-woon had given the man money on her behalf, Hae-won hurriedly left to find Ji-woon. She didn't want to accept financial help from Ji-woon, especially since he wasn't even sure if the man was his biological father. This uncertainty was causing Hae-won a lot of pain, but she firmly believed that her mother could never have fallen in love with such a man. Meanwhile, Ji-woon had just returned when he received a call from the man. Since Ji-woon had previously said that the man could come to him for help with any difficulties, the man unceremoniously asked him to help rent a place. Ji-woon wasn't foolish though. The next day, he went to the place where the man worked to pick up the cup he had just used. The following day, Hae-won confronted the man, clearly stating that she could not accept him as her father. Before the man could explain, Hae-won slammed a paternity test report on the table. The man was instantly taken aback, but Hae-won did not look at the results. She always believed that her mother was an upright person. With Ji-woon by her side, Hae-won's mood improved greatly. The two went out together to relax, and Ji-woon gave Hae-won a gift he had been preparing for a long time. However, when Hae-won opened the box, she found it was empty. Ji-woon then told Hae-won that the person he loved wasn't Ji-hae but her. At that moment, their passionate hearts finally came together, and they confirmed their relationship forever. After their relationship was discovered by the old chairman, Hae-won was driven out of the Qing mansion. Ji-woon knelt and begged his grandfather to allow him to be with Hae-won. He asked, "Does Grandpa want to break us apart like he broke up my parents back then?" Ji-woon's words touched the old chairman's heart. If he hadn't driven Ji-woon's mother away, his own son wouldn't have left. To prevent the tragedy from repeating, the old chairman finally chose to let them be together. On the other side, Hyun-min had also resolved his inner conflict and came with Ji-hae to visit his brother. Hyun-min promised that in the future he would cherish Ji-hae together with him. From that day on, Hyun-min often helped his grandfather manage the company, and Seo-woo also fulfilled his dream. One day, everyone gathered on the grass for a picnic. Accompanied by music and warm sunshine, they happily enjoyed life. After many ups and downs, Hae-won finally met her prince. Thanks for watching. Please like and drop a heart if you like the story.